The LUMIX GH7 is here, so let's have a look at the 7 upgrades from the LUMIX GH6. Just a little disclaimer, I did film the LUMIX launch video for the LUMIX GH7. But this video is my own opinion and is not sponsored, so let's just jump into it. Yes, LUMIX has finally added phase detect autofocus to the GH line of cameras. It works very similar to the LUMIX S5 II and S5 IIX. For my tests, it works the best with subject detection modes, of which there are a few more on the GH7. Apart from human and animal autofocus detection, the GH7 also has plane, car, motorbike, as well as train. On top of that, there is an option to select what the camera should focus on. So let's say you're tracking a motorbike, you can either choose the full motorbike or just focus on tracking the helmet. With a car, it's a similar concept, either the entire car or just focus on the front of it. There are also a few autofocus modes. You can select either a full area to autofocus, a zone, which I prefer to use most of the time, one area, and there's also tracking. From my use, I found that the tracking mode box isn't very sticky and it does drift off if the subject itself doesn't have enough contrast. So I really hope LUMIX can improve on the tracking functionality. PRORES RAW Internal. I couldn't believe that the GH7 can do this internally, but yes it can. RAW format records the highest quality footage either to the CF Express card or to an SSD via the USB-C port. This gives the most flexibility in post-production to adjust ISO and white balance after recording. But remember, RAW footage is huge. There are a few different bitrate options available to choose from. So 5.7K 25 frames per second RAW HQ file is going to be 3.5 gigabits per second. So this is going to be a huge file size. The next one down is a little bit smaller at 2.3 gigabits per second. And if we go down to Cinema 4K 50 frames per second RAW HQ, it's also 3.5 gigabits per second. Going down to the lowest 4K 25 frames per second bitrate, it is going to be a 1.2 gigabits per second. You can also record proxy files at the same time, which are very small file sizes that you can use to show the footage to the client, as well as use them to edit, as they're a lot easier to work with, and you just replace them before you export. You can also enable real-time LUT for the proxy files, which means if you're shooting a vlog, your original footage will still be flat, but the proxy files will have a grade on them. Frame.io is also integrated into the GH7, which means you can shoot and upload the proxies to the cloud at the same time. That way you can have someone editing the video as you shoot, which is fantastic for edits that need to be delivered on the same day. 32-bit float audio is the next feature. You can think of it similar to recording raw video, where you can adjust the levels after filming. With the additional XLR to mic adapter, you can basically get raw audio which doesn't clip even when things get really loud. One of the first meetings I had with LUMIX, I remember saying that it would be awesome to get 32-bit float audio on LUMIX cameras. And I know there are quite a few people asking for that feature too, but it's still so awesome to see a feature that you asked for actually make it to the latest product. And it really shows that LUMIX listens to their users. So, IBIS is still fantastic, and now it has the new E-stabilization high mode added to it for extra smoothness. Keep in mind that E-stabilization mode does crop in, and from my experience, I only like to use it for tracking in or tracking side-to-side shots. For any kind of parallax shots, I turn it off and I just stick with IBIS. There are 4 levels of stabilization in the GH7. First, we have IBIS, which is just the sensor stabilization, which means you can stabilize even manual vintage glass. There is dual IS, which some of the LUMIX native lenses do support, so that's in-body image stabilization plus the optics are stabilized as well at the same time. There's E-stabilization, which has 2 different strengths, and we have Boost IS for getting tripod-like shots. And on top of that, you can enable anamorphic stabilization for stabilizing anamorphic lenses with different squeeze factors. There are now 39 LUTS slots compared to the 4 LUTS slots on the GH6, so that's a huge improvement. If you are baking in the LUTS into your footage, you can stack 2 LUTs on top of each other, so for example a Rec 709 LUT and also a grade LUT, and on top of that you can change their opacity individually. But if you're just using the LUTs to monitor your shots using log view assist, you still won't be able to stack or change their opacity. The only control you get is turning the LUTs on or off on the camera monitor, as well as an external HDMI display. I hope that LUMIX will bring the LUT opacity slider and also LUT stacking feature into log view assist. GH7 also supports the new Lab app. It's an app that allows you to transfer LUTs from a constantly growing LUT library from Lumix creators, and you can also create your own LUTs within the app and transfer them directly to the GH7. It also has an automatic transfer function. For the time being, the auto transfer only works for photos. The Lumix S9 has an MP4 Lite format that can automatically be copied to your phone, but I'm not sure if Lumix will be bringing that MP4 Lite format to the GH7. But you can still manually transfer standard MP4 files from the GH7 to your phone, just the file sizes will be a little bit bigger. If you're shooting in a flat vlog picture profile, you can use the LUMIX LAB app to color grade your footage and export them to your photo library. Just if you're wondering, the frame rates are still the same. So 5.8K at 4:3 open gate and 30 frames per second, 5.7K and 60 frames, and 4K 120. And yes, autofocus does work in 4K 120, but it doesn't support subject detection. One of the things that I thought was a bummer was the subject detection was also turned off when you're shooting in the highest resolutions and have an HDMI cable plugged in at the same time. So if you're shooting in 5.7 or 5.8K and you want autofocus with subject detection, it won't be available when a monitor or a wireless transmitter is plugged into the HDMI. There are also a few honorable mentions. The info display can now be shown on the camera as well as an external monitor at the same time. Before on the GH6 you could only see the menu on both, but the camera info such as shutter speed and audio levels were only showing on either the camera monitor or an external monitor. But now we can see them either on the camera monitor itself without seeing it on the external monitor, or you can see it on both camera's monitor and the external monitor, which makes so much more sense and it's a lot more useful. Some of you might ask if the GH7 has the streaking issue that was present on the GH6, where in very high contrast situations you might see light streaks. Lumix has corrected this issue on the GH7 and I haven't noticed any light streaking. Overall, this is such a feature-packed camera. It has everything that we loved about the Lumix GH6, plus a bunch of upgrades. Even for one-man band productions, you can basically just set this camera up, press record, and not worry about audio clipping because you have 32-bit float, and not worry about the white balance because you have internal RAW recording, and face tracking is also really good. In my opinion, this is the most feature-packed Micro Four Thirds camera out there. If you want to get a way more in-depth look at the Lumix GH7, definitely check out Richard's Wong of a 90-minute long review, and I'll also be posting a full walkthrough of how I set up the GH7 with all my custom settings for filming. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys next time.